Well, there came a time somewhere in my seminary years where I began to wonder if I, in fact, had adult attention deficit disorder, also known as ADD for grown-ups. The reason being was because in certain classes, not all, but in some, I would find it oh so challenging to pay attention and do the assigned reading. And likewise, in those same classes, to write a paper, oh, it was so hard to focus. There were so many distractions. And I would find tangents to research that seemed much more compelling than the task at hand. It was during these times I could identify with my dogs. When I would take them for a walk, and everything would be going smoothly, and we see the path ahead, and then, squirrel! So hard to get back on track. Well, somehow I had managed to get through high school and college without anyone ever suggesting that I might benefit from some of those medications that are often prescribed to help this disorder. So I thought, well, maybe this was an adult onset thing. But then I looked back, and I could see a pattern. I remembered back in junior high several times staying up well past midnight working on my math homework. Homework that should not have taken so long. But because the problems were so repetitive, I had felt it a necessity to read my entire history textbook first. I love history. But in early October, I probably didn't need to read the whole book. I needed to do my algebra. Well, so one of these times when I was reading or not reading or trying to read, I ended up doing a little research and investigating what my problem was. What I discovered was that my Myers-Briggs personality type is one that is often misdiagnosed as having ADD. Our problem, those of us in this personality type, is that if a topic or a subject doesn't pique our interest, doesn't stimulate us enough, we can find it nearly impossible to stay tuned in. I know, it sounds like a lousy excuse, but that's what you get with an ENFP. Fortunately, now that I knew what my problem was, I have been able to develop some skills and tools to help keep me from wandering off. It can still be challenging. I suspect, after reading today's gospel, that there are some characters in the story that might have had a similar problem as I have. To give you a little bit of history, the tradition at the time was that the bridegroom would gather with his entourage and travel to the bride's home. But just outside the gates of her home, the bridesmaids would be there waiting to welcome him and escort him in, where they would enter together and celebrate. Well, in the story we hear in Matthew's Gospel today, the bridegroom was delayed. We don't know why. He just was. And the bridesmaids waited patiently for him as long as they could until they finally all fell asleep. They woke up hearing that he was nearly there and discovered that some of the bridesmaids had planned ahead and prepared for a long wait, while others had not. These others panicked, and some of them had the not so brilliant idea of going to find a store open at midnight to buy more oil. And when they left, they missed the party. These 5 bridesmaids ended up focusing on their oil, or lack of it, instead of on the groom or the wedding. They were waiting so diligently when, squirrel. I keep thinking, if they had just stayed, they might not have had oil for their lamps, but there would have been enough light for all. I mean, seriously, you know these bridesmaids had been primping all day, making sure their hair was right, wanting to look their best for the wedding, even though the wedding really wasn't about them. Appearances for them ended up trumping them being there for the groom. They were so concerned over how it would look that they did not have oil, that they ended up abandoning their post and being missing in action when the groom finally did show up. Of all the things they needed to do that day, being there to meet and greet the groom had to be top priority, much higher than anything having to do with any oil. They had one job to do. So what about us? What are the squirrels that distract us from Christ? We are to bear light so that others can come to see Jesus. We are to pray, to soak up the scriptures, to learn to love, to listen to how God is calling us in this world that has such different priorities, this world that tells us to pursue wealth and status and power, to put ourselves first at all cost, and all the petty distractions and things that sidetrack us along the way. This parable is telling us to be prepared, to let our light shine, to share the good news, because we never know when Jesus is coming. And I think it's also telling us that it is so important that we do not take our focus off of the kingdom of heaven. Because if we do, we may miss it when Jesus shows up in the here and now. We have a job to do. We need to put aside our foolish pride and any way that we are thinking that this wedding is only about us. It's about Jesus. It is about the groom. It is about how when Jesus comes to us as someone who is hungry, as someone who is sick, as someone who is broken, as someone who has been discriminated against simply by being who they are. When Jesus comes to us as the least of these. Martin Luther once wrote that we should know that we serve God when we serve our neighbors. To do good for them in love, be it a child or a spouse or a servant, an enemy, or a friend. Are we prepared? Are we prepared to serve, to heal, to bring justice and protect, to let our light shine? Are we prepared to love and be loved, to let Christ in, to welcome Jesus into our lives? While we are waiting and watching, hoping for that time when we will find Jesus, Jesus comes to us and finds us first. Amen.